On today's show, we'll talk about the 5 most asked questions about veganism. If you're interested in becoming vegan, you're a new vegan and you have questions, or if you're a vegan just looking for ways to answer all the many questions we get as a vegan, this show is for you. Thanks for listening to the Very Vegan Vegcast, a service of veryveganrecipes.com, your source for the easiest, most delicious, and exciting vegan recipes on the internet. And make sure to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/theveganaddict. This is episode 1 of the Very Vegan Vegcast. Thanks for listening to the show today. So before we get into today's show, I quickly want to tell you what the goals of the Very Vegan Vegcast will be. We hope to expose you to the very latest health information about being vegan, assist you in adapting and continuing and enjoying a vegan lifestyle, answering questions of people who are maybe interested in becoming vegan, or maybe helping out new vegans, as well as interviews with some of the most exciting vegan chefs, authors, health experts, and icons in the vegan community. Of course, we're always open to suggestions. If you have any ideas, if you have questions, please make sure you contact us via our Facebook page at facebook.com/theveganaddict. So on today's show, we're going to talk about some of the more popular, most asked questions of being a vegan. Running one of the largest vegan websites and Facebook pages on the internet, we get a ton of questions, as well as just being a vegan around friends, family, and people that we meet in real life as well. And we're going to attempt to answer some of those questions today. Of course, if you've been vegan for longer than a few minutes, you've probably heard this question. But what about your protein? You gotta have your protein. As it turns out, this hype and concern over protein is something that's really been perpetuated by the United States beef industry, the dairy industry, in concert with the USDA and the United States government. They've really overestimated and overstressed the importance and levels of protein that a person needs to have a healthy diet. Not only that, they encourage you to get your protein from the absolute worst protein sources. If you haven't read the China study, and if you haven't read the work of Dr. T. Colin Campbell, I encourage you to do so. He's a doctor who actually researched the effect that animal protein has in correlation to turning on and turning off cancer cells in the human body. And basically what his studies determined was that animal protein really is detrimental to your health. So not only should we be getting much lower levels of protein in general in our diet, we also shouldn't be getting animal protein, period. Higher quality sources of proteins for everyone, not just vegans, would include whole grains, beans, nuts, and even vegetables and fruits have adequate amounts of proteins. Basically, vegans who get enough calories to eat every day, and if they eat a wide variety of foods, you're just very unlikely to be protein deficient. As a matter of fact, there was a study done about 3 years ago on vegans, and they determined that at the end of a 6-week period, all 212 vegans were actually consuming higher than what the World Health Organization's recommended levels of protein intake for the human diet were. So it's very easy to get enough protein. As a matter of fact, if you're mixing beans into your diet, nuts, eating things like quinoa, tempeh, soy, in terms of whether it's soy milk, things like this, you're just going to really be getting enough protein. Protein is one of the smallest concerns that you have as a vegan. As a matter of fact, there are some much larger concerns as being a vegan, and actually some legitimate concerns as well. And that actually brings us to our second most asked question, and I'm going to expand it out to include some other things, but the most asked question is about vitamin B12. Do I need to supplement with vitamin B12? It's actually likely that you could become B12 deficient. One of the great things about vitamin B12 is the body stores this for long periods of time. So if you have been a meat eater and you've had high levels or adequate levels of B12, you'll actually sustain yourself from those vitamin B12 stores for quite some time. It could be 6 months. It could be a year. I know in my case, 2 years into the vegan lifestyle, and the vitamin B12 levels are still there. Of course, everybody's levels will vary. The thing that I would recommend, first of all, is that you don't try to guess about your B12 as well as any other parts of your health. I highly recommend that every 6 months, if nothing else, you just go get a blood panel done with your local health physician. They'll be able to test all the levels in your blood, and this includes things like zinc, iron, calcium, B12, and other things that can potentially become health concerns for vegans, depending on how widely varied their diet are. Will sometimes be short in the zinc, sometimes be a little short in the iron, sometimes in the calcium. But the main one is B12. And there's several solutions to this. Of course, you can take sublingual B12. There's B12 tablets that are strong enough you can just take once a week, like every Sunday. Of course, there's daily B12. And then the final option, of course, is to get B12 injections at your doctor, every 30 days, every 60 days. One of the surprising things about this B12 question is this isn't just a vegan problem. A significant portion of the meat-eating public are also deficient in vitamin B12. And so this is one of the things that the detractors of the vegan lifestyle will point out as being a problem. Oh, you can't be vegan because you're going to be B12 deficient. And I've seen several different studies that range from anywhere in the 30 to 40% range of people who actually eat meat are also deficient in vitamin B12. One of my great counter questions to people, especially people who are being a little bit rude or a little bit antagonistic when they ask you about, well, where you get your B12 from, I'll generally handle it one of two ways. One is to just be very informative, have your facts straight about B12. The second way is to be more flippant and go, well, I prefer to ask you a question. Where are you getting your folate from? Where you're getting your vitamin A, B, C, phytonutrients? Where are you getting all those things from? Because if you're living off the standard American diet, which is basically just fats, meats, and I guess potatoes are thrown in occasionally, you're missing out on a lot more important vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients and things like that vegans are getting in copious amounts. So I kind of like to turn that question around on its head. The number 3 question that I get asked the most via the Facebook page and in real life is, how can you afford to be vegan? There's this myth that when you switch over to include more fruits and vegetables in your diet and things like that, that you are going to not be able to afford to be vegan. And this just isn't the case. The most expensive thing about being a meat eater is meat. Meat is very expensive. Beef is incredibly expensive. Pork is incredibly expensive. These are the staples of the meat eater's diet. As a matter of fact, most people eating the standard American diet, if you look at their lunch plate or their dinner plate, half of it's going to be meat. A quarter of it is going to be probably a potato product, whether it's baked potato or mashed potatoes or potato au gratin or whatever. Then another quarter or eighth is going to probably be a biscuit or a roll or some type of bread. And then you'll see a tiny section, which is 1/8 of the plate or something will have some kind of a token vegetable on it, which may or may not get eaten. The most abundant sources of protein and least expensive proteins out there today are beans. Beans and lentils are incredibly high in protein. They're incredibly delicious. They're easy to prepare. They're easy to cook. They're super healthy for you. And in addition to those, you can add things like nuts and quinoa into your diet and things like that to make up for the protein. And then beyond that, your diet pretty much will remain the same. As a matter of fact, you're going to be giving up butter. So you can either just learn to eat without butter or you can go to vegan butter. Either way, the cost is going to be pretty equivalent. A lot of things like that are going to be trade-off for trade-off. You're still going to eat the potato. Again, you're just not going to have the butter. If you're a person who likes the sour cream, there's several different great versions of vegan sour cream out there, and they taste fantastic. The price is pretty equivalent. It's kind of a dollar for dollar trade-off, even down to the milks. You're not going to pay more for soy milk or almond milk or, whatever vegan version of milk you try to buy. It's really going to almost be a dollar for dollar trade-off. So really the only difference is replacing the meat, and beans, lentils, things like that are much, much cheaper than beef and pork. you're actually going to be reducing the cost of your diet. Now, if you're a person who, and this happens to a lot of new vegans, you come into the vegan lifestyle and the way you cope with the changes is by purchasing a lot of these quote unquote gourmet vegan foods. Like you can buy vegan hamburger patties, you can buy vegan chicken, you can buy vegan bacon. I've seen, all of these types of things, and those are going to be very expensive. So if you choose to take that route, then yes, your cost is probably going to be much higher. But you really have to look at it in terms of short-term goals, because what your ultimate goal should be is to increase your fruits and vegetable intake and then just replace meat with, again, things like beans and lentils and quinoa and things like that. And once you're able to make that transition, it just depends on your personality. If you want to jump into it and take this on full force, then you're going to see these things happen almost immediately. If you're somebody who's going to buy a lot of these gourmet products, which are more expensive than meats, then you're just going to have to guide your way into getting into a more whole food way of eating, which is actually going to be cheaper for you. There's a couple of different books that you can get. I'm going to link them in this podcast post. So if you go to veryveganrecipes.com/1 for episode 1, veryveganrecipes.com/1, you'll see links to a book by Robert Robertson that you can pick up that will help you eat vegan, as well as a couple other books and some resources as well. We actually have a couple of articles about this on our website as well. I'll link all of those into that podcast post. So you just... and for anything that we talk about on today's show, I'll make sure that all that is linked up at veryveganrecipes.com/1. Canine teeth would be question number 4. Why do we have the canine teeth if we're not supposed to eat meat? This is kind of a frustrating question, because if you compare the teeth of actual meat eaters, and if you'll do a Google search of this and look at the teeth of carnivores and compare them to the teeth of humans, they're nothing alike. They're just nothing alike. Yes, humans have very, very tiny canine teeth. Like, there's barely any difference than your canine teeth and the rest of your teeth. And those canine teeth aren't long enough to really rip into meat or shred meat. Your teeth are flat. They're for grinding and chewing. It's pretty clear if you do an honest analysis of human teeth that what it is that we're designed to eat. The human digestive system, right from the teeth right on the way through, are designed to not eat meat. My last question that I have to answer a lot is, why did you go vegan? This may or may not be helpful to you, but since we're kind of introducing ourselves on the podcast today, I thought I would use that as question 5. Everybody, I think, becomes vegan for 1 or 2, maybe 3 different reasons. It's either from an ethical, philosophical, compassionate standpoint, or it's from a health crisis standpoint, or just a general desire to be healthier standpoint. Or it can be some kind of combination of the two. I actually came to veganism as a result of being a person who's been overweight my whole life. I'd actually dieted and lost a significant amount of weight. And I had gained control over my eating enough that I really wasn't eating the way I had my entire life that led me to be overweight. And so launching from that standpoint, I'm like, this is a great time to try to be healthy. This is a great time to try to eat the best I can eat. And so I started researching what is the best diet for humans. And I think the first thing I found was because I was very concerned about heart disease in my family, because, my grandfather died from heart disease when I think he was 58. My father died from a heart issue when he was 60. I would like to prevent that if I could. So that was my first area. And that led me to Dr. Esselstyn. His book, his information, his stuff, again, will be linked at veryveganrecipes.com/1, just a 1. But he actually has reversed heart disease in patients by putting them on a strict vegan diet. And these were heart disease patients who the hospital had given up on. They either weren't eligible for a bypass, or they had already had 1 bypass or 2 bypasses. And, they had continued eating the same way, and they're right back in the same condition. And so there was nothing the medical community could do for them. And so, that's the way the United States medical system works, is if there's a conventional, quote unquote, accepted way to treat something, you're not ethically, a doctor can't treat you a different way because it's considered malpractice. But now after they have done everything they can do for heart patients, there's nothing else they can do, then a doctor like Dr. Esselstyn can step in and treat it with something unconventional like diet. Well, the results were phenomenal of how he not only stopped the heart disease, but reversed it. And there's some great stories in the book he wrote. But that was the first thing I found, and it got me thinking, hey, maybe there's something to this. Of course, I read the writings of Dr. Joel Fuhrman I read, and some of the other doctors as well. My favorite, though, is T. Colin Campbell, who did a great amount of research worldwide in the China study, and then he also did a study that I referenced earlier about animal protein and the turning on and turning off of cancer cells in the human body. So, I mean, all these things made it pretty conclusive to me that a vegan diet was the way to go. And so I decided to venture off into that. And not long after I did, my mother was actually diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And so I'd already done a lot of research up until that point. I really dove into the cancer aspect of the vegan diet for my mom. My mom became vegan. She actually became vegan the day she was diagnosed. We immediately put her on a, mostly vegetables, but some fruit juice plan. And then, later on moved her into eating. But anyway, she's been vegan. And that was 3 years ago. And she's still fighting the fight, but she's still here. And she's outlasted a lot of people who were diagnosed at the same time she was. That's why I got into veganism. Now, I'll say this, after getting into veganism, once you get into the vegan community, you can't help but be exposed to other aspects of it, the ethical/philosophical aspects of it. And so, as a result of becoming vegan and going to many vegan websites, I've seen the videos of how they treat chickens and how they're grown. And I've seen the videos of how they, cows and pigs and the dairy industry and all those things. And so it adds a ethical, philosophical element on top of my foundation, which was coming here for help. I think the hardest part is to break that mindset that you must eat meat. And once you break that mindset, then you become open to seeing how tragic the way chickens raised is. And you are open to see how tragic the beef industry and pork industries are in these factory farms. Whereas before, you don't really see it because you haven't broken that psychological connection that you have to meat. I think that's one of those things that happens. I want to thank you for listening to the show. I want you to know a couple of different things. If you go to veryveganrecipes.com/1, there will be ways that you can subscribe to the podcast there. We'll also have all the links, and anything that we talked about during the show will be located there as well. Feel free to share this, and please share this on your timeline, especially if people ask you questions about veganism or you would like to share calm discussion about veganism with your friends or family. And thank you for supporting our website and supporting our Facebook page. We're very honored and pleased to have one of the largest vegan recipe sites and Facebook pages on the entire internet. We're looking to expand what we do, and this podcast is just one part of that. I'm not sure what our next episode is going to be about, but I am talking to a couple of incredible vegan bloggers, vegan chefs. And so I hope to have one of those on an upcoming podcast, and it may be the next one. Stay tuned for that. And thanks for listening to the show today. Remember to keep it vegan. Thanks for listening to the Very Vegan Vegcast, a service of veryveganrecipes.com, your source for the easiest, most delicious, and exciting vegan recipes on the internet. And make sure to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/theveganaddict.